So in our continuing series on unsound chess, we're going to espouse a few principles for beating chess computers that we didn't do in our first Beating Chess Computers video. Basically, what I said was don't lose on time. So I have a real hard time playing uh, chess against my favorite chess partner, Fritz. I find Fritz to be a wonderful training partner. The old adage that computers are predictable and are always, making the same moves is complete crap. Fritz really plays a lot of different moves and a lot of different variations, and once you master one, he goes to another. So um, you think that you're solving an opening, and you're not at all. You're really learning. And I've stuck with Fritz 12. I know there's new Fritzes out, and I don't feel compelled to go beyond Fritz 12. But in this particular video, I'm playing Fritz at the highest 5-minute level he's allowed. Um, this is 2200 Fritz, and I'm playing 5-3 because I can't play Fritz at 5-0 or 5-1 at 2200 because I lose. Um, for one thing, Fritz is set at playing fast, and so I don't get to think on his time at all. Fritz can easily take 20 to 40 seconds for the entire game, so I really have to play a very accurate game to beat Fritz in these situations. And what's interesting about this is that there's a different unsound chess principle that applies to beating computers at this time control in particular. And what I've discovered is that there are a number of different things you can do to win. Number one is you create an immutable pin. For some reason, computers fail during, of course, the whole world fails with what amounts to an immutable pin. And by immutable pin, I don't know, I've never heard anybody else use this term, but it's a pin that can't be broken without causing extreme loss. And I'm even willing to sacrifice against computers to get these types of pins. And I'm going to show you a game in a second where one occurs after a long period of time. I'm willing to sack all kinds of things to create an unbreakable pin. So computers have a very hard time recovering from that particular type of tactic. The next thing is that computers don't understand zugzwang very well. To begin with, they shuffle their rooks, and shockingly, they give themselves wonderful evaluations. Like you think, boy, is that computer wasting time? He just took his rook and put it back where it was on the last move. Or like, this is like the 10th time he's moved the rook in the last 20 moves. And the computer has evaluated himself as being perfectly even or fine, or possibly even better in some cases, just simply through shuffling rooks. And we do see this in Super GM games occasionally, so I think they're learning from computers. But it's something that is not very intuitive to humans. And there is something else that I've discovered, and that computers will resign. If you provide the proper algorithm key, and that would be, there is some threshold at which they go down in their own evaluation, and they can see things a lot better than you can. So they're going to notice that they're down 5 or 6 or whatever it takes for them to resign before you do. So that's part of creating the immutable pin. They've calculated everything 12 moves in advance in every direction, and you haven't because you can't, and yet they resign. So that is yet another principle for beating a computer. And yes, that is an unsound tactic. So without further ado, we're going to look at a game I played as white, and you're going to notice that I can't play my unsound openings against Fritz at master strength because he just slaughters them. In fact, that's how I know that they're unsound. So we're going to go through the moves one by one here. This is a Roy Lopez. I'm playing a very weak 4 knights type approach. He plays 4 knights, I just pin. So this is an ancient form of a Roy Lopez, and it doesn't give white any advantage, as you can see. Fritz tends to play that move, although he does play bishop to c5 and knight to d4 both. Knight to d4 is very challenging to deal with. Now my entire game at this point hinges around pinning that knight on f6 and getting some sort of attack on it. And the first thing you see is that Fritz destroys that attack. He's not going to let me move knight to d5. He takes. So now it becomes a bit of nip and tuck as to exactly how I'm going to go about doing this. I'm taking away a point of contact here. This is not the move that the computer recommends. And notice Fritz wants to move h6 anyway, but um, he pins, and now it's up to me to get rid of that bishop. I do not want that bishop pinning me on that square. And once again, I'm playing some very stodgy, difficult defense. I don't want to play d5. This is different than I play against a human in many cases. I'm just playing solid development moves. I'm going for d4, d5, trying to chase that bishop out of there, trying to create the immutable pin on f6. If necessary, under the right circumstances, I'm going to sack my knight on g5 if he plays g5. So when that occurs, he can't be able to move his queen off of that diagonal and still cover his knight. In other words, go to e6. He also can't have his other knight in a position where he can cover his knight. In other words, b8. If his knight is able to retreat to b8, then go back to d7, then that foils the process as well. So he's making some interesting moves here, and I'm covering my e-pawn simply because that makes pushing it more plausible. Here we go with the rook shuffling. And once again, these are not the worst moves in the world. I mean, Fritz is not giving me much of an advantage here, if any. So I'm just developing. He's chasing. Now suggesting knight to d8, which he played. It's interesting watching one engine analyze another's play. c5 is supposed to be a good move here, according to this. That's not something I normally do. I'm just sitting on this. There are circumstances under which a3 is useful, believe it or not. Once again, here we go with the rook shuffling. We're going to cover the b pawn, free up the other rook. These are moves that humans don't make. Now he moves b5. Okay, so now I have an advantage. It just suggests moving a4, which is kind of interesting. I can guarantee I didn't do that. I would suggest a d4 here. Once again, neither side is making much progress. Considers that a slight inaccuracy. And now that's interesting. I just went up one because he moved his rook pawn. The engine wanted c5 as opposed to moving the rook pawn. Okay. So now I finally get d4 in. Now this is the beginning of the immutable pin principle. What's going to happen here is I'm getting an advantage. And if I get d5 in, then that e6 square is not usable by his queen. And I'm going to eventually be able to attack that knight on f6, believe it or not. So I see the computer's now making the accurate moves. This is not something that the computer wanted me to play. Once again, I'm fortifying my idea. Says I can play c5 here and get a huge advantage, which I don't do. I'm doggedly going after my principle. Still c5, c5. This is kind of like a King's Indian type of formation without the fianchetto for black, and pushing c5 evidently weakens the e-pawn a great deal. Once again, I'm very stodgily looking. He's now preventing c5. I'm pushing. Now it suggests knight to h5. Look at that. That's an interesting defense. I happen to know Fritz didn't do that. He took, which results in now I get the immutable pin. So he has almost no way of covering that knight. He's shuffling his rook, as I predicted in our HTML. So now rook to b7. Well, he pushes pawn. Bishop to g4, which is what I moved. Very good. So the engine found that. And now g6, look at that, because we have this threat. You know, f5 square is really weak. H takes g4, now g6, which is apparently what the engine has decided is necessary. And now I have the enormous advantage. Now it's suggesting f4, which will attack that knight right away. But that gets a little complicated, especially from the standpoint that he can move his king up and a variety of things. I move f3, which maintains the advantage. And actually now it turns out to be a stronger looking move, according to the engine. Now he's black. Now Fritz is lost. Now there we go. That's the immutable pin. The immutable pin says there's no way he's going to get out of that over there. Uh-oh. Looks like the engine says I blundered because I allowed him to move his king up. It demanded that I move queen to h3 right away as a counter to that. So I got inaccurate. Well, I'm not perfect. I do have an advantage though. However, he didn't move his king up. So now I regain my advantage because now I'm going to double up on that knight. Now the knight is never going to move, and his other knight has very little hope of ever recovering it, and he's lost. This is the immutable pin. Yeah, I saw knight to f5 check there for a second, which evidently is a killing shot. Evidently because you can get queen to h6 check in if the pawn takes, and then you're going to win that knight and have a mating net, as well as attacking the queen. Look at this. Computer's best move is to give up the queen for almost nothing. So, at this point, Fritz, at its highest blitz level that I can set it at, resigned. So, this was a good game, an interesting game, but it showed the principles of what to do. He's tied up. The fact is that he's virtually in zugzwang here if he has to give up his queen like that right in the middle game. So, I just thought this was an interesting game that espoused a few principles about how to beat computers.